out of nowhere, flying saucer mystery is with us.
Airline and Air Force pilots.
The Air Force itself has officially admitted that flying saucers exist.
Is there another civilization somewhere in space? Are we under surveillance by an intelligence that has revealed itself to us?
Hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
Is life everywhere the same as us? Or are we just one example of a vast array of possible kinds of biochemistry?
The paradigm of science is not equipped to handle this phenomenon.
Identified flying objects that we
Believing in them is a matter of communicating with them. Very strange and unusual
Economic reasons, political reasons, military reasons. It's not a scientific issue.
It's a puzzle, but it's a puzzle that's worth exploring.
Our Earth has been observed by alien civilizations for at least the past 50 years. Throughout our history, each age in our development is characterized by an ignorance about the scope of possibilities not yet understood, that future generations may look back on with a sympathetic smile of condescension.
To us, in the 20th century Earth, this might seem magical, but I tell people to maintain some sense, if they can, please ask them to maintain some sense of humility. Because if you were to show this video camera, or a hologram, or a laser to someone only 300 Earth years ago, it would appear to be a magic. It would be considered supernatural.
Such is the case with UFOs. To us, they represent intangible illusions between fantasy and reality. "400 years ago, the Earth was believed to be the physical center of the universe. Nicholas Copernicus, and later Galileo, challenged that belief, suggesting that the sun was the center. And still 200 years would pass before William Herschel's stellar observations, and later Edwin Hubble's classification of galaxies, relegated our sun to a single, insignificant star among billions. Only then do we begin to imagine our place in an incomprehensibly vast cosmos."
I think there is a certain twilight zone of phenomena that, if confirmed, would really overthrow the entire materialistic worldview.
Let me just say, as a professor of philosophy who writes professional articles and knows how to do academic research, there is in this field some incredibly good literature, very sophisticated material.
There's just a wealth of information, and I would challenge anybody to disprove that. You see, anyone who says there's no evidence to study has not looked. It's as simple as that.
The possibility of a purely psychological explanation is ruled out. The discs do not behave in accordance with physical laws, but as though they were weightless, and show signs of intelligent guidance, such as would suggest quasi-human pilots. The officials in possession of authoritative information should not hesitate to enlighten the public as speedily and thoroughly as possible. Dr. Carl Gustav Jung, 1954.
It's just more than UFO crashes and alien bodies. I mean, there's a whole science here. And to quote Dr. Hynek, he said, the UFOs, whatever they represent a science of the 21st century. Right now, we don't have the technology or the know-how to explain what they are and how they do it.
Crop circle formations continue to appear on several continents.
This is the beginning, a doorway opening to a new science, a new physics, a new energy, a new world. I think very much that's where this is all moving.
Thousands of credible sightings continue to persist.
The subject of UFOs is part of the subject matter of some courses that I teach.
Oh, good.
So it's got academic credibility in the community.
Yeah.
At least as far as I'm concerned, the evidence is really overwhelming that extraterrestrials are here. It's hard, after you see 5 weeks of that material, it's really hard not to have that opinion, I think.
Abduction accounts from around the world, beginning in the 60s with the Hill case, recall exact similarities and also continue to persist.
You know, the problem here is in a way, it's the messenger. Here I am, a historian at Temple University. Here, Bud's an artist, Bud Hopkins, and there's Mike Swords, who's at Western Michigan University, and various people saying these things that this might be happening. Is, well, the fact that we are saying it automatically means it can't be happening, because the message is far too big for the messenger. If this were truly happening, we would not be the messengers. The President of the United States, the Secretary General of the United Nations, they would be the messengers, and that would mean it wouldn't be happening. So no matter how much we say it, and no matter how much abductees say it, that automatically means it can't be happening.
The UFO phenomenon has been a part of our lives for the past 50 years. With it comes the possibility that we may finally discover who we are and what we humans might accomplish in a vast cosmos, endowed with intelligence.
What I always state about this phenomenon is that taken together, the collection of all of the photographs, the videotapes, the accounts that I've been mentioning, the ground traces, the physical marks on people's bodies, the descriptions of the events in the craft, and et cetera, the sightings, all of that constitutes an extraordinary phenomenon. And I think it is indisputable that an extraordinary phenomenon demands an extraordinary investigation.
To continue to dismiss the UFO phenomenon may very well be ignoring the most profound occurrences of our times. In our struggle to achieve technological dominance of the physical world, we have endangered not only ourselves, but countless other living forms. And in the process, we seem to have lost a profound sense of our place in the cosmos.
The paradigm of science is not equipped to handle this phenomenon. Sociological reasons, threat, denial, psychological reasons, economic reasons, political reasons, military reasons. It's not a scientific issue.
So there's a lot that scientific method, as we know, can do to study this phenomenon. But what it cannot do is try to explain the meaning of it or the purpose of it. This must be left to another type of reflection.
For the last few years, it's been thinking a lot more about what's happening on this planet and seeing that the evolution of human consciousness has reached a crisis point, which goes along with the time when we have the potential to step out and start exploring the stars. That's the challenge where we're really facing at the moment. We've become masters of the material world, and technology is really, technology is tools, and we've got the most incredible tools now to do almost anything we want in the material world, including stepping off this planet into space. But I think what we've got to become is equal masters of our minds. And that's the next frontier, is inner space. We've got to stop being victims of our fears and all the stuff that's inside us. We've got to actually become masters of ourselves, move beyond this egocentric phase, so that we can then become the true masters of our technology and use that with wisdom for the good of ourselves, the good of the planet, the good of the cosmos.
The stories piqued my curiosity, and I began first collecting news clips from the local papers, which published little short news items on them, occasionally. And then I started looking for pictures, and I clipped a few of them out of newspapers and magazines until I ran into somebody that had an actual print. And I went to a lot of trouble negotiating with him to get a copy of that. But once I had one original print, it was easy enough to trade that to the next man and in return for his. And then I had 2 to trade, and then 4 to trade, and the collection grew rapidly when I had something somebody else wanted. And I just kept trading the same pictures over and over to others who had different pictures, and eventually everything that was out there came my direction, and I put it in the file. So at the present time, I think there's over 4,000 pictures in the files, and they're all different pictures, but it's purged, pretty well purged. I don't have any in there that I know are fakes or have strong reason to believe are fakes.
Colonel Stevens began his career in the Air Force as a young fighter pilot during World War II in the Pacific. An expert in the field of aircraft technology, after the war he was stationed with the Foreign Technology Division of the Air Technical Intelligence Center at Wright Field. During his 24-year career, Colonel Stevens played a role in the negotiations which led to the Japanese surrender and served as a consultant to the Bolivian Air Force in its structural formation. Retired from service in 1963, Wendell Stevens has since earned an international reputation as one of the world's foremost UFO investigators, having published well over 20 books on the subject. His interest in the phenomenon was established in 1947 when he was transferred to Alaska and placed in charge of B-29 crews flying missions over the Arctic.
When I got to Alaska, I found that my additional duty, I was assigned there as an assistant base operations officer, completely out of my specialty. My specialty was technical engineering. As an assistant base operations officer, and my additional duty was supervising a team of civilian technicians from Wright Field, where I had just come out of, that were installing special equipment aboard the B-29s that were flying their target profiles are over all the B-29 crews had their targets in Russia, and they carried them home with them. They had them with them all the time so they could get on an airplane in 5 minutes and have the targets with them. They were required to fly a profile mission on their targets over the Arctic in Arctic airspace and their Arctic conditions at least once, and every crew was rotated through Alaska to do this. My team was installing special equipment to look for anomalous aerial phenomena, is what the Russians were calling it. We were calling them flying saucers. We were looking for surges in the electrical system. We installed surge detectors in every system on a B-29. There's 5 or 6 different electrical systems. We installed magnetic detectors in the lines. We installed cameras in positions that didn't have, all the gun positions on the B-29 already had 60mm cameras in them. But we installed other cameras that looked forward and looked aft. We had handheld cameras. We had even 35mm movie cameras and a big 70mm movie camera that could be used. And they also had a Fairchild 8x10 camera that was a big thing like this. It took a picture on an 8-inch by 10-inch negative. So all of that stuff was carried aboard the airplane, and after the operation people briefed the crews, then after the weather people briefed the crews, then the Coast and Geodetic Survey people briefed the crews, then I had to brief the crews on the equipment that my team had put aboard and how to use it and what it was for. And if they got anything when they came back, they were debriefed in the same order, and if they had experienced anything, they'd be turned over to me last, and they'd tell me what they experienced one by one. And while they were doing that, my crews would be downloading the cartridges, cassettes, and film cans, and all of those things we had. And if they had had an experience of any kind that was unique and important, the data would all be boxed in a metal box looked like a little footlocker, about that long and about that wide and about that high. And that was padlocked on a lieutenant's wrist and flown out to Washington every night on a courier. And he had to go to a certain office that had a key to take it off to unlock him and turn him loose. And they kept the box and sent it back on the next courier flight. We had several of those, and this was how the data was transmitted to Washington. We never had no way to read it. We couldn't develop that. We could, but they weren't allowed to develop the film, to read the tapes, to look at the movie camera film. Nothing.
But you were hearing stories.
Well, we'd hear the stories that resulted from the action that was on the film, but we never got to see any of it. So there were some real interesting stories about seeing objects sitting on the water, submerge and disappear as the B-29 came along. Other times they'd take off and fly away. Once was seen to come to the surface and emerge and fly away. They saw them take off from the ice surface of the ice pack up there, the snowfield. And these are big objects, 100 feet in diameter, that have no ground support equipment. You know, to get a B-29 airborne in the Arctic in the wintertime, it takes a field of equipment around the B-29 as big as the B-29. Well, here were bigger craft sitting on the snow up there with no ground support equipment that take off and fly away at high speed. And that puzzled our senior leaders a good deal, because they wanted to believe that it was a Russian innovation that had come out of the war, that they didn't want to accept the idea that it might be extraterrestrial. In fact, I was almost alone in that idea. Most of the time, I'd tell my boss that I thought they were extraterrestrial beings, and he'd laugh and he'd say, they can't come here from there and go back. Why would they come? Because cosmic distances are too vast. You know, if it's going to take you 50 years to get someplace and 50 years to get home, who's going? Among the first photographs taken on the old tin-type cameras was one at Drobak, Norway, showing a photographer with the big bellows over his head and a big camera on a tripod was taking a scene of the harbor, an afternoon scene of the harbor, early evening, and he saw an object moving from right to left across the field of view, snapped a picture of it, and got perhaps the first photograph of a UFO at close range in Earth's atmosphere in the sky here. And that picture was taken on the 27th of July in 1907 at Drobak, Norway. The next picture of importance, and probably the second or third picture of UFOs taken, was photographed by Mr. Alfredo Fendricas, a weekly news magazine reporter for the paper in Fatima, in Portugal. And you know, the apparitions began in September, in August, 13th of August, 13th of September, and the 13th of October. In the first apparition, the children saw the sun swooping overhead, and an apparition appeared, and to 3 shepherd children, they reported that to their priest. The priest went with them the next time. The apparition happened, only the 4 people saw it. They got the word that it was going to happen a third time on the 13th of October. Now, all this is predicted in advance. And by the time of the third anticipated apparition on the 13th of October, there were 12,000 people gathered in the fields there. When the object appeared, it was brilliant, came through they saw a spot, and it emerged through the underside of the clouds. It was rotating on a vertical axis, began to swoop over the heads of the crowd like this, making low passes back and forth over the crowd. Alfredo Fendricas got 2 pictures with his camera of the object in the sky. We have one of them here. It shows up as a brilliant ball of light below the clouds. It's a tin type, so it's not the sharpest picture of all. Then the next pictures of consequence were the pictures taken during the Japanese invasion of China and their Manchurian operation. They used aircraft, and objects appeared over the flight line of the Japanese bombers preparing for missions. They appeared following the bomber formations in flight. They appeared in the sky above formations. They even passed through formations, much like the Foo Fighters of modern history, modern war history, except they were something else then. And it was during that time, during the Manchurian occupation, that a Chinese or a Japanese general in the occupation forces was walking down the street in Tianjin, China, and his attention was drawn to an object in the sky because the street photographer, one of those with the old bellows camera, had it set up, and people started pointing and shouting and pointing to the object in the sky. Rickshaws stopped, crowds stopped, people pointed. The tin-type cameraman aimed his camera and took one picture of the object coming down the street. The Japanese general went over and bought it and took it back to Japan. And that's the photograph made in 1942 at Tianjin, China, in the middle, full day, daylight. The next one of any serious importance was one that was made over Los Angeles on the 24th, the night of the 24th to 25th of February, 1942. And this was after our war with Japan had started, and we had our cities in blackout at the time. Los Angeles was blacked out every night, San Francisco, San Diego, the whole west coast of the United States. And at early in the morning, like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, disc-shaped objects appeared over the city. And the anti-aircraft batteries turned on the searchlights. The objects passed back and forth through the searchlights, some dozen objects in the sky. They started, anti-aircraft batteries started firing on them, and they fired, golly, they fired 1,430 rounds, anti-aircraft rounds of ammunition. Didn't hit a thing that night. They killed a few people. The falling metal from the anti-aircraft shells killed people, dogs, set houses afire, did a lot of damage, but didn't hurt any, didn't bring down any alien craft. The next one of serious importance, again, was before, well, it was after Kenneth Arnold described flying saucers. Yeah, that was in 1949. But the next photo event of interest happened on the 17th of March in 1950 at Farmington, New Mexico, when on that day, Mr. Walter Rogel, managing editor of the Farmington Times, published news on the front page of his paper, "Huge saucer armada jolts Farmington." Now what happened on that day, the town's population of about 5,000 people then, looked up and saw spaceships, circular, disc-shaped, metallic disc-shaped craft with domes on the top, passing over their city. They were changing position within the formation like a flock of bees or birds. They did not maintain a regular established formation. It was just a large gaggle of objects that flew over. Hundreds of them flew over for almost 2 hours, and the same thing happened the following day. One picture escaped collection by the military people that went there and canvassed the houses. They took all the pictures, took cameras, but somebody had in town, left town after taking the photographs and took one to Durango, Colorado, where he turned it into the Durango paper, and Durango published this one photograph. Shows about 7 or 8 of the objects in the sky, 5 of them in a loose formation at lower level, and 4 or 5 at higher levels beyond it. A bird watcher walking in the woods on the 23rd of April, 1950, was crashing through the underbrush, and he emerged into a clear area not far from Redbud, Illinois, facing the southwest. He came into a clearing from the south side, and as he stepped into the open area, he saw a large object hovering just over the scrub bushes there. Now, this was about 30 or 40 feet in diameter, and it was less than 100 feet high. It was below the tops of the trees. And as he stepped into the clearing there, it started to move. Slowly at first, and then faster and faster. He had time to open his reflex camera, where you look in the top, and they're hard to sight in because the scene moves the opposite direction once you move the camera. And he got it open and got one picture, and by the time he could roll the film and get set up again, it had moved so far away he was afraid he wouldn't get it. He snapped the picture. He got a little dark spot in the sky, but it was not very definitive. It was just a dark smudge leaving. The first picture was a good, sharp, clear picture. And he turned it over to the local newspaper, and it was published on the paper. And a few days later, he was contacted by a newsboy who was throwing papers that time of day down the road in a rural area. And the newsboy said that he saw the object coming from the direction of the woods, heading down the highway at about 4 times, 5 times the speed of an airplane. And he looked up at it and saw it, and down the road a little ways, he came on a man and his wife working on the roof repairing it, and he said, "Did you see the thing that just went over?" And they said yes, they had watched it also. So there were other observers that corroborated Dean Morgan's story, and they came out in news reports the following day. So that was an interesting sighting because it represented a type seen rather close up and photographed within 100, 150 feet, 200 feet of the camera. The next one that got any real attention occurred on the 11th of May of 1952 at McMinnville, Oregon, at about 7:30 in the early evening of 11 May 1952. Farmer Paul Trent was in the kitchen of his home when he heard his wife, who called to him from the backyard to come out and see the strange object that was approaching. And he immediately ran for his folding camera and dashed outside to meet her. There against the low overcast sky, he saw a circular dome disc with a tower on top of the dome, a raised cupola. It was moving fairly slow. He had plenty of time to frame it. He snapped the first picture, and then he had to move to his right to snap the second picture. There was no flame or efflux of any kind visible, no sound. It was completely silent. His wife didn't hear any sounds either. The pictures he took on the 11th of May, and he didn't report them until the 12th of June, when he had his pictures developed and back, and he showed them to a friend, Frank Wortman, who suggested they take him to the newspaper, and they took him to the Richmond, California Independent, where they looked at them, tested them, and published them for the first time. So now that it's 2 months after the pictures were taken before the information got out. But they have become a classic in the lore of ufology, as you guess if you want to call it now. And they've been verified by a number of researchers.
My hypothesis is that these people who are driving these UFOs, or at least the people who designed them, have a technology that's more advanced than ours. I mean, I think that's obvious, that they're more advanced than our technology. Their technology is so advanced that they have figured out a way to artificially warp space-time the way a black hole does, only without all the gravitational effects that rip things apart into their constituent atoms. So that they can actually manipulate. They have some sort of a generator in here so that they can actually produce this field around their craft like a little bubble, a little private universe that they carry around with them. So that they can actually step out of normal space-time into their own private universe and then step back into it at other coordinates. So if that's possible, then they can not only come from all these distant places, but they can also come from parallel universes that coexist with ours and we're not able to see because they're on a different vibrational level or whatever. They can even come, probably, from our own past or our own future. Because as the quantum physicists are telling us now, the past, present, and future are not separate. Our idea of the stream of time is only an artifact of our consciousness. It is our consciousness that's traveling. It isn't that things are happening cause and effect in a linear fashion. It is our consciousness that's doing that. So the past and future actually exist simultaneously with us, and if you're able to warp space-time, you can travel to and from them. Time is not linear. In fact, it doesn't exist. It's just a concept that we use to describe aspects of space-time, and it's an artifact of our consciousness. So this warping of space-time, I think, can explain a great many things about the UFOs.
Some remarkable UFO photographs from the early 1950s were taken by George Adamski through his 6-inch telescope near Mount Palomar, California. In many respects, Mr. Adamski can be considered a pioneer in this field, also claiming to have been in contact with the occupants of the craft.
I consider myself extremely fortunate because really from a very young age I had the opportunity to be in an environment where this type of information, this field of UFOs was really in an amazing time. I mean, the news was covering it as much as they possibly could. Scientists were exploring, we were coming in the space program, so space was on everyone's mind. And during those 63 to 65, which we were involved with Mr. Adamski personally during those times, we really had an opportunity, I really had an opportunity to see some of these crafts exceedingly close. And these are impressions that never leave my thinking because they were so deeply rooted. And to go to these lectures in which you had literally lines of scientists and military officials sitting there and people listening intently on the information that was exchanged and given, it was a very dynamic time in this field, which certainly has changed in the last 20 years. My father had numerous sightings, and due to these sightings, he got in contact with many different agencies of the government and investigated heavily into others who had reports of UFO encounters and taken pictures of these type of craft. And because of this investigation, he got in contact with Mr. George Adamski, who was in many respects a pioneer in this field already back into the late 40s and early 50s. I've been taking a large number of telescopic pictures and had motion picture footage of these crafts, and even had many controversial contacts during these times. And this is really the basis of how I became involved through my lifetime, through my father, and through Mr. George Adamski. George Adamski was originally a student and involved with philosophical teaching. And it was due to his study of philosophy that led him to the conclusions that life and the principles of nature and life around us were not by any means a manifestation of only the environment around us. Basically that creation and life was universal. And it was this recognition that led him to investigate through telescopic means, looking out into space and at the moon, to see if he could find evidence of this expression of life. And he was able to, through lunar photography, take some of the very first pictures of spacecraft orbiting the moon and traveling in the Earth's atmosphere already in the late 1940s. Historically, the first analysis, I would say, began with Leonard Cramp, who did orthographic projections on the Adamski pictures. He did comparison analysis on the Adamski scout craft with the Coniston pictures taken by two young teenagers in England several years after he took his photographs, and then also with a Brazilian shot that was taken in late 1954. And based on this orthographic analysis, Dr. Cramp came up with the dimensions and the exact sign and signature of these type of craft, finding them by that technology in the 50s to be authentic. Since that time, Adamski's pictures have gone through biometric radiation tests. MGM Studios did an analysis on the film. They've gone through each decade of technology's analysis, and they have been always found to be authentic and to be some of the best pictures ever taken. And I think one of their strong points was that they are taken 40 years ago, long before the computer technology that we have today, which certainly can composite any type of picture that we wish to. In this particular shot, we have a picture of a cigar-shaped craft with its propulsion system fully operational, so it looks like it's enveloped in a luminescent shield of fluctuating light. And it's located between the Earth and the Moon. It was taken by a 6-inch telescope Mr. Adamski took in the late 1940s. And this craft can be in dimension anywhere from 1,000 feet to several miles in length. And this craft here is the same type of craft as you see in the picture above, but you can see the outline of the hull itself. And this is in orbit in the Earth's atmosphere. And here is another craft around the moon, and you can see it's trailing behind it the several other craft in sequence as it's around lunar orbit. And here we have another shot around the moon, and you have here half a dozen craft in formation flying along the surface of the moon.
In early March of 1951, through his 6-inch telescope, George Adamski was able to photograph a remarkable series of 4 photos as the large carrier-type craft was releasing 6 scout craft.
And basically this craft is what we would call a miniature city. It is in an environment that is enclosed to itself, and these bell-shaped craft, like our aircraft on an aircraft carrier, are housed in this cigar-shaped craft, and so this is used for distance travel through long distances of space.
The bright glowing effect of the craft is a result of natural particles in space coming into contact with the resonant field generated by the craft. This effect can also bend the light waves entirely around the craft, causing it to disappear from view.
What we have here is a picture of the bell-shaped, the scout-shaped craft with the 3-ball condensers underneath it. The condensers are a means in which the polarity, the electromagnetic polarity, can be shifted direction, and it's set up triangularly, so by shifting polarity from this angle to this angle, the craft maneuvers in a 3-dimensional field. And around the outside of the cabin area, there are 3 sets of 4 portholes, or 12, and that is common to all the scout crafts that have been photographed anywhere in the world, whether they are Adamski photographs or not. The scout craft never touches the surface of the planet. In other words, when it comes down to land, even when the propulsion system is shut, what you and I would consider off, there's always a trickle charge going through, so it maintains several inches off the surface of the ground. So the 3 balls that you see underneath the saucer portion of it have nothing to do with landing pod, because the craft never rests on the ground. These are part of the propulsion system that help to direct the magnetic field and the magnetic flux underneath the craft. These craft operate on what we would call a pro-gravity field. They do not believe in fighting the principles and the forces of nature, because they are far too strong. What they do is they believe in blending harmoniously in with those forces. And it's very much like you can jump against a ocean current and swim and expand a lot of energy, or you can turn around and let it carry you where it's going. And they follow the currents of electromagnetic energy through space from planet for planet. And this is how they operate. Although George Adamski may be better known for his pictures of extraterrestrial spacecraft, he was far more concerned with letting people know that it wasn't just the existence of these craft that was important, but actually who was behind it and the reasons why these people come to visit us. And I think that is to a great extent lacking today. We hear so many stories of all types of interaction and contacts that are of a fearful or harmful or aggressive nature. And this is exactly contrary to what George Adamski spoke about and what his life work was really concerned with doing, and that was to educate people into the purpose behind these contacts and the reasons that they came to talk to us and the benefits that we as a civilization can derive from interactions with these extraterrestrials.
Well, I think I've always been interested in the possibility of extraterrestrials, and I think through my own work with meditation, spiritual investigations, I've come to the conclusion that one thing that all creatures in the universe share is consciousness. All beings, all living beings. We may be different, totally different biologically, I mean, but ants, amoebas, whatever. One thing we all share is that we are conscious creatures. The nature of our consciousness, what happens in our consciousness, may vary enormously, but that seems the common ground, the common bond between us and any other species there may be elsewhere in the universe. And I just, for the last few years, just been thinking a lot more about what's happening on this planet and seeing that the evolution of human consciousness has reached a crisis point, which goes along with the time when we have the potential to step out and start exploring the stars. And it seems to me that any species which gets this far has to take some sort of cosmic intelligence test, which says, are you really intelligent? Are you really wise enough to be able to use your technology for the good of the cosmos, rather than just for your own ego needs? And that's the test we're facing now. And if we fail that test, then I think we will wipe ourselves out or put ourselves back to the Stone Age or something like that. Conversely, if we get through this time and develop the capacity to begin to travel, whether it's materially or psychically, across space, we will have proven that we can move beyond this egocentric phase of consciousness. We will be, to all intents and purposes, saints, wise beings, whatever you want to call it. So conversely, I feel any species that has developed the ability to be in contact with us here, again, either physically, psychically, whatever, must have gone through that itself. It must have passed its own cosmic intelligence test, which means, as far as we are concerned, they must be the level of consciousness of angels or whatever. I think all the stuff about extraterrestrials being malevolent beings, they're coming here to zap us with ray guns, all that stuff is just a projection of our own fears, of our own ego, of our own warlike nature, which we've got to transcend. Any extraterrestrials must have transcended that, or they'd have wiped themselves out. So it seems to me that if we're going to consciously approach them, we need to do so on the level of consciousness, like we would approach some guru or angel or very wise spiritual beings. That's what I think they are, is wise spiritual beings relative to us.